That reading by Barbara Rhodey, I think she said, is how she pronounced it. I've always wondered because one of her children is Kate Rhodey, my colleague. I always wondered if that was Kate. And Barbara Rhodey, that reading comes from a meditation manual. That most of the UU meditation manuals are ministers, collections of things that they wrote. But that one was a lay one, and it's one of my favorites. I love everything in it. Well, on to breakthrough. When I was in seminary in Berkeley, quite fortuitously, I became student coordinator of a National Endowment for the Humanities grant on mysticism and spirituality. The upshot was a nice stipend and the opportunity to hobnob with some brilliant world-class professors, including Robert Bellah, then chairman of the sociology department at UC Berkeley. It got me in the habit of reading his books, and so I was, and I was deeply moved by everything, and he was a brilliant guy. I was delighted then, a few years later, when Professor Bellah spoke to delegates at the annual Unitarian Universalist General Assembly. He had been asked to respond to a comprehensive survey of UU congregations. The survey had been conducted in connection with this fulfilling the promise, recovenanting process around anti-racism that many of our congregations had been involved in at the time. And it revealed, not surprisingly, noted Professor Bellah, a high premium on individualism among UUs across the board. Making clear at the outset his own membership in the Episcopal Church, Dr. Bellah went on to affectionately critique Unitarian Universalism as being too individualistic. Indeed, in his conclusion, he suggested that ultimately we had things, what do they say? Ass backwards, back asswards, mixed up. That our first principle, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, or as we teach in Sunday school, everybody's important, should in fact be second. And that our seventh principle, respect for the interconnected web of all existence, of which we are part, should rather be first. That the web, not the individual, is the a priori. This is an interesting idea to ponder, it seems to me. Which is the ultimate value, the web or the individual soul? Last year, the music director in Rancho Palos Verdes, where I was working, and I put together a service on the Unitarian poet E.E. Cummings. Now, I like Cummings. He clearly comes down in favor of the individual. But Cummings' view, even among UUs, is not universal. Maybe Robert Bellah was onto something. I personally think it's not an either-or situation, that the truth is actually more paradoxical. My thesis this morning is that we are part of the web, an integral part, but because we're human beings, we tend to forget this, forget our connection, and get carried away with all the 150,000 responsibilities and demands and considerations of life. Trapped in a never-ending pursuit of the future, we lose touch with the ever-present moment, become alienated and strung out, heartsick, restless, confused, basically off-center, or as my mom would put it from time to time, totally schmoed. Well, we have all been there. And one can become pretty desperate, as we all know, until by some circumstance, often seemingly serendipitous, we catch ourselves, or more accurately, it seems to me, are caught by the web and reminded, literally reminded, of our connection to something bigger than our egos, our connection, in a word, to the Spirit, to Source. What I want to talk about this morning are those moments, that experience of being caught, of being reminded, remembering, or recollecting one's whole self. The experience, in other words, of breaking through. There's a Greek word for this, metanoia, which we can think of essentially as the positive experience of paranoia. Not that the universe is a conspiracy to do me in, as paranoids think, but that the universe is a conspiracy designed for my benefit, as James Joyce repeatedly suggested throughout his oeuvre. In other words, we are part of a web that is designed, as it were, to enlist our awe, our wonder, and our inspired efforts to blossom into the best persons we can be. We are vessels, each of us personally nuanced vessels of the web's creative power. Maybe you have had an experience that brought this home to you, an experience that suddenly brought you to your senses in spite of yourself. The 17th century mathematician Blaise Pascal, author of this morning's opening words, had such an experience, and it changed his life. He wrote about it and kept a copy of his words in his breast pocket. He had a special little pouch made that he would wear for the rest of his life every day until he died, with those words inside it. Plato's famous allegory of the cave describes something similar, which must have occurred to him through the influence of his mentor. The allegory is described at length in the Republic. Of course, it's all expressed dialectically, with Socrates asking questions and Glaucon, his interlocutor, answering. But essentially what's depicted is this: a big cave underground filled with people. I've got this on so I can show you. So here's the thing. So all these people are sitting here, just like you are, let's say in the first couple of rows. And there's a big wall on the back. And behind these people, there's a balustrade that goes over like this. And behind that is a big bonfire. And so the people sitting here, guards walk back and forth across that balustrade, and their silhouettes are reflected on the wall. That's what the people in the cave see all the time. Now it happens that, as I said, the prison guards have the habit of regularly walking across this bridge, and they carry, as they go, large cutout figures that, with the fire behind them, cast interesting shadows on the wall in front of the prisoners. And wouldn't you know it, the community living there in the cave, none of whom realize their predicament, end up becoming organized and ranked socially by virtue of who among them can most accurately predict what shadow figures are likely to appear next and what they all mean. Until one morning, one of the prisoners wakes up and finds her chains and shackles removed. Naturally, she gets up and slowly ascends from the depths of the cave, past her captors, past the balustrade, the bonfire, and on up to the light of day. Only now she realizes how misguided and constricted her former condition had been. The experience, the psychological experience of release and escape from bondage, of wandering out of constrictive darkness and into daylight and freedom, such an experience clearly must have happened to Plato. Of course it happened, since basically that's what the dialogues are all about. Philosophy as a means of liberation and enlightenment, escape from psycho-emotional darkness and entrapment, and into the light and clarity. Some people plainly have had experiences of this kind, epiphanies, super epiphanies almost, what scholars would call a hierophany, like this fellow or woman, I'm not sure which, on the cover of this morning's order of service. For others, most of us, I would suspect, things don't happen with such a bang. The change is subtler and more gradual. Unlike St. Paul on the road to Damascus, we are not knocked off our horse. Still, there is such a thing as awakening. In the words of the late Kenneth Patton, renowned UU minister and humanist, there are moments when the sheerest and simplest sensual desire wears a golden significance. Suddenly, as the air is crystal clear after the rain, objects take on a naked, transparent meaning. We are probed and wounded by the smooth, chill surface of glass, by a flashing sword of color, by the explosive individuality of a bird or child. We are stabbed by the isness and thatness of things, and there comes a fresh and splendid sense of existence. We are shocked into self-awareness. I remember reading an essay written by one of my colleagues, the Reverend Denise Tracy. Reverend Tracy had missed her plane and was in a crummy mood, sitting alone in a far-away airport, simmering and staring blankly out the window when, slowly at first, she became entranced by an emerging scene on the tarmac outside the window of the terminal. A group of adults was huddled, waiting. A plane came up. Stairs were attached, and then a bunch of children stepped off. Some carried in grown-up arms, some older ones walking by themselves. Slowly, she realized what she was witnessing. Chinese children meeting, for the first time, their adoptive parents. And slowly, she began also to realize longings of her own heart captured by this scene. Longings that led ultimately to adopting a child of her own. Breakthrough. I had a breakthrough of my own 18 years ago this very weekend, walking my dog. I was living in upstate New York at the time. It had been cold, as upstate New York always is at this time of year, below freezing for several days. And so I decided, Maisie, my dog, seemed to think it was an excellent idea, to walk over the frozen Susquehanna River and visit the deer-covered island halfway across. Coming back, you guessed it, breakthrough. What was funny about it, like Denise Tracy, I'd been kind of down in the dumps at the time, sullenly walking along, head down, while brooding over this or that problem and difficulty. What about this? What about that? Oh, so many problems. Maisie, what am I ever going to do? When suddenly, splash, into the drink, ice-cold, rapidly flowing H2O. There's a curious aspect about these life-threatening situations. One's other concerns sort of immediately fall away. Breakthroughs have a way of doing that, have a way, that is, of putting things in perspective. And indeed, problems notwithstanding, my immediate, unscripted, and totally unconscious response was to reach for life. And I was lucky. Maisie, being a golden retriever, kind of was wandering off ahead of me, so I didn't have to worry about her coming into the water, too. And I immediately recognized it's probably not over my head, though it's probably close. And remember from the Boy Scout handbook, you can always, there's a couple of inches between the top of the water and the bottom of the ice. I was okay, but getting back home covered with ice, that was hard. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but unlike this blown away person on the cover of the Order of Service, for most of us, most of the time, breakthroughs are painful. Maybe not the breakthrough itself so much as the trip down the birth canal leading up to it. Experiencing a significant loss, a death, divorce, a health crisis, financial reversals, getting fired or otherwise waylaid professionally. It's so easy to exist instead of live, writes the author Anna Quinlan, describing a breakthrough experience of her own. I learned many years ago, she goes on, something really bad happened to me, something that changed my life in ways that, if I had my druthers, I would never have changed at all. And what I learned from it is what today seems to be the hardest lesson of all. I learned to love the journey, not the destination. I learned that it is not a dress rehearsal, then that today is the only guarantee you get. I learned to look at all the good in the world and to try to give some of it back because I believed in it completely and utterly. And I tried to do that by telling others what I had learned, by telling them this. Consider the lilies of the field. Look at the fuzz on a baby's ear. Read in the backyard with the sun on your face. Learn to be happy. And think of life as eternal illness, because if you do, you will live it with joy and passion as it ought to be lived. Well, you can learn how to do these things if you get a life, a real life, a full life, a professional life, yes, but another life too, a life of love and laughs and of connection to other human beings. Breakthrough. Different from Pascal's experience, different from Denise Tracy's, but not all that different. What all these experiences of metanoia have in common, what makes them epiphanies or full-blown hierophanies, is that they break us out of our isolation and self-centeredness and into relationship. And not just smelling the roses type relationships either between oneself and nature or the products of the imagination, but person-to-person, give-a-damn relationships with actual human beings that matter in your life. Relationships that require investment of time and energy, and that pay back, I might add, significant dividends. Dividends that link, that connect, that heal, that remind us of our inherent worth and dignity, the first UU principle, by simultaneously making manifest, making clear, and making realized our integral connection to the web, the seventh principle, such that we experience ourselves simultaneously as unique individual persons and integrally connected to everyone and everything else. Breakthrough. Let me add that this dynamic applies interpersonally as well. So often, our most intimate relationships get stuck until some crisis forces us to look one another in the eyes and say, come on, honey, we have got to break through this. Followed by reaching out, helping one another off the ice if one has fallen through, back out of the torrent and onto solid ground. Communities, too, can fall into ruts of convention and self-absorption, and can break through as well. Our churches can break through, and some of them have, and are breaking through right onto the threshold right now, today. From what I can tell reading through your church's history and from talking to many of you who were here in the early years and still are here, this congregation has on several occasions gone through breakthrough periods, as you will be in the future. There's a lot that needs to be attended to over the coming 18 months. Some of it will be hard, but a great deal, like selecting, getting to know, and voting on calling a new settled minister, will be fun and cause for wonderful celebration. And now is the time. Yesterday, Carol and I went into San Francisco for the women's rally and march. And we were very glad we did, as it was very inspiring for both of us. American culture, not to mention global culture, is currently in the midst of an enormous transformation. A sea change is happening right now. Some of it dangerously destructive, for sure. But there is a lot going on that is wonderful, life-affirming, and uplifting to the heart and spirit if you let yourselves become a part of it. Let yourselves be part of it. Let us collectively be part of it here at UUCIL. Beyond too much individualism and into relationship, into beloved community, the theme of the Beginning Now canvas, into the interdependent web of all existence, into life, beginning again and anew today. Spirit of life, hear our prayer. Let us break through every day. Let us lead regenerative, transformational, breakthrough lives. So may it be. Amen. Namaste.